Okay, welcome to the Not Another Hat Stash Be Gone Cowl tutorial for the 3-needle bind off. I have my cowl all here, and as you can see, I did the option of blocking it with some blocking wires before attaching it in the 3-needle bind off. I just really wanted this color work to relax. My piece was actually quite puckered in some places, especially up here where I used a bit of a lighter weight yarn. And so it relaxed beautifully. The wires worked exactly as they were supposed to. So my piece is already blocked. I just need to attach the two ends. So before we do that, I want you to make sure you've woven in or tied off all of your ends. As you can see, I chose to tie, I did a triple knot and I did it just a smidge loose. So there's still enough give there. You don't want to tie those overly tight. And I just left long ends so that if for any reason these knots ever came undone, which is doubtful, I do have ends that I could try and obtain and weave in. But since this stuff all goes to the inside and gets permanently closed up in there, we're not going to worry about it. So that's one of the beauties of a pattern like this. Okay, as we get ready to do our 3-needle bind off, we have to make sure, absolutely sure, that we are not twisting our work when we join the two needles together. So that would be like taking a twist like this before you got your needles paired up, and then what you end up with is a Mobius, which, you know, may be fine, but that's not the intention for this project. So one of the best ways to do that is to lay your piece nice and flat and then bring your needles together just like this until they match. So oftentimes with a 3-needle bind off, you're holding your right sides together like this and putting that seam selvage we're going to create on the inside of your work. That would be something you might do, like say for the shoulder seam of a sweater. In this piece, because it is going to be a sealed off tube, which would make that a little bit difficult, we are going to make a decorative 3-needle bind off by having that seam selvage show all the way around the right side of our work. And so in order to do that, we're actually putting our wrong sides together. So now that we've got our needles matched up, I've got my working yarn from my last round still attached over here. And I'm going to cue this up to the tip. This is one of the needles from the left side, and here's the other needle from the left side. This is where I took my provisional cast on out. And I'm going to hold both of those parallel to each other in my left hand. Now this is a little bit cumbersome when you get started because you've got all these needle tips up in your business, right? We only need to use one of these to knit with, so we're going to try and make the other one stay out of the way. It'll be just kind of weird while we get going, but once we move away from the beginning of the round, it'll get easier. But basically, we're just going to like try and tuck this other one and just use this one right here to knit with. So let's pull it up here and we're going to get started. So the instructions say our first thing we need to do is a little setup where we go into the first stitch on our left needle and the first stitch on our right needle. The first stitch on the left front, first stitch on the left back. And we've got our working yarn, which is actually coming out of the left side here because this needle's turned around backwards from what we would normally do. And that's totally fine. And we are going to knit those two together, come out cleanly out of both of them and slip them off. So there they go, bye-bye. And now we have one new stitch over here on the right needle. So now this is where we get in, started with the repetitive part of this. We'll do that again. We go into the first stitch on the left front, first stitch on the left back. We're gonna knit those two together and slide them off. And now that we have 2 stitches over here on the right needle, we're gonna use one of our tips to pick one up, pick the first one up off over the second one, just like that. And now we've bound off one. All right. So what we do is we just keep continuing in this way. We knit a pair from the left and there we slide them off. And we lift the first up, off, over the second. So I'm just going to keep working a few more so we can stop and take a look at what that actually looks like on our fabric. So keeping these 2 points lined up the same and not letting one get longer or the shorter than the other is going to help you as you work, because sliding the stitches off both of them sometimes is tricky if they are not aligned. So we go in and in, knit them together, slide them off, and lift first over second. And so let's just keep repeating this for a little bit. we'll get about 10 or so stitches done and we'll stop and take a look at how this is going to look on our finished cowl. All right, after this pair gets lifted off, we'll stop and take a peek. Okay, I'm just going to temporarily put the stitch over here on the left so I can get this needle out of the way and show you. This is how it's going to look. So this is typically a selvage right here, this kind of 3D effect we're having on the outside. This is typically with 3 needle bind off something that people hide to the inside. But we are intentionally doing this to present on the outside. And that means there is a back to this cowl. This is the part that would be, that you would ideally position to the back of your neck. All right, well, let's just keep working, binding off all 84 stitches, and we will meet back here at the end and talk about how we finish this off. Okay, now we've arrived at the last 2 stitches left in our bind off, and we're just gonna lift this one up and off and over, so we're down to 1. And then we will cut our yarn and pull that through gently. Okay, so now what we have, we can see we get a little bit of weird business at the place where we began. And we're just gonna use our tail to clean this up as best we can. It's kind of just part and parcel. I've got a loose last yellow stuff here. I'm gonna try to push that to the inside. So I'm gonna take this last, from this last stitch right here, and I'm gonna go over here to our first bind off right here, this little V, and go under that V and snug that up a little bit and back down into the last bind off. And I'll maybe come up right here. And that's gonna try to close the line. This is my fake stitch right here. Get over the top, there we go. This is my fake stitch. And you can see it kind of mimics the look. So we've come over here and back down to mimic the stitches of the bind off. This is my fake stitch right here. So you can snug that up. And now we're just going to try and weave in our blue end and close any gaps that remain. Well, dark blue gray, this end here, I'm calling it blue, but so I'm gonna go and just try and make it nice and tidy on both sides. And let's go over here and we'll go down maybe into this area. And once we feel like we've got that cleaned up a bit, I'm just going to weave it back and forth underneath the bind off for a little while. So let's do this. I'm just going back and forth under my bound off stitches because that hides it nice. And once I think that that's secure, I'll just do one more. I'm going to go down carefully into my fabric. You don't want to catch the back side. Make sure that you're just in the loose part inside, in the tunnel basically. And I'm just going to pop up over here somewhere random and pull. And I will trim that end. My scissors are not very good. And let it pop to the inside. And there we have it. If you made your bind off a little tight, you might want to block just that portion, or just by spray wetting it or steaming and pinning to get that bind off to loosen up. But mine's pretty good here. It might be a smidge tight, but here we are. We have our cowl all ready to wear. Thanks, guys.